So being said that, on behalf of the Department of International Studies of the University of Guadalajara and of Dreamtown, I thank you all for being here and welcome to this webinar, Strengthening the Livelihood of African Urban Youth in the Context of COVID-19. Joining us today is a very special guest from Denmark. You can see at the background, it's very Copenhagen. Rasmus C. Bering is the CEO and co-founder of Dreamtown, a Copenhagen-based non-governmental organization working for the well-being of young people in cities, particularly by transforming slums into safe, green, and creative spaces. Partner of several international actors operating development projects in Sierra Leone, Uganda, and Zimbabwe, and also member of the Danish Association Civil Society in Development. Rasmus has also been program manager and program coordinator in Plan International, consultant of a number of organizations and member of Torp and Bering Consult. He has extensive experience in Africa, I can tell you, both as a scholar and as practitioner in countries such as Ethiopia, Mozambique, South Africa, as well as in Egypt, Bangladesh, and the United Arab Emirates, just to name a few. Academically, Rasmus has a strong background in international development studies from the Roskilde University in Denmark and holds a master's degree in peace and conflict studies by the University of Oslo. Additionally, he has been a visiting researcher at the Nordic Africa Institute in Uppsala, Sweden, and in the Kofi Annan Peacekeeping Training Center in Accra, not to mention a great colleague and friend. It is a pleasure to have you here, Rasmus. I am glad you found the time to join us. In the following minutes, he will be sharing his expert opinion on the challenges Africa faces in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic from an international development perspective, as well as his experiences and reflections as a scholar and practitioner in the continent. I ask you to give your full attention to Rasmus, and please help me to welcome him on the spotlight. Rasmus, the floor is yours.
Oh, thank you so much, Aarón, for the invite. Wow, virtual hands clapping, that's pretty cool. Thank you so much for that warm introduction. And I think you missed out one point, and that is that we also used to study together in Oslo. So me and Aarón, we go way back. We had a lot of very good discussions about academia and about life, and also shared a few beers from time to time. So I hope that your students also get to experience that side of you.
Hopefully.
Hopefully, yeah. In preparation of this lecture, I went through your course syllabus and the presentation of your program, Peace and Conflict Studies in Contemporary Africa and the Middle East. And I must say that to all the students, you guys are very lucky. This is an extremely interesting course, very good literature, and yeah, so salute to you, Aarón, for putting together a very cool program. And I almost wish I could be there and attend it myself. So yeah, as Aarón said, I have a background in peace and conflict studies. Graduated in 2010. But since I finalized my studies, I actually never worked on conflict issues. I went straight into the field of development studies. However, with the coming of COVID-19, I actually find myself being back in the field of the peace and conflict studies. Maybe not completely voluntarily, but by demand, simply because the world is changing. So, I mean, a lot of things are happening around the world right now that demands that we think about things differently, that we need to look across disciplines. So I can't tell myself that I'm just working in development. Right now I'm working in development and also somehow within the field of peace and conflict studies. So I think it's really interesting, I mean, to link up with you guys who are students of peace and conflict studies, and also have this debate about how does the peace and conflict studies paradigm influence and inform the paradigm of development and vice versa. So the program or the project I would like to present today is, as Aarón told you, is called Strengthening the Livelihood of African Youth During COVID-19. And this is a new initiative that we're starting up. We just got the project, but the reason why I would like to present this project is because this is the project where I feel that it has taken me back somehow into the field of peace and conflict studies. So I thought it would be relevant to share this with you today. So just a brief overview of the program. First, I will give you a brief introduction to Dreamtown, who we are as an organization. Then I will talk a little bit about the COVID-19 challenges that we see in Africa. Then I will zoom in on a specific case of Zimbabwe. And I just had a quick talk to Aarón before we started up this meeting, and I think there's a big value in really like examining concrete cases to really understand what is happening on the ground. As political scientists, we have a tendency to look at the broader terms, right? But to really take your time and really to see what is this specific case saying about the world right now, and what can we learn from it, is something I believe is very valuable. And then finally, I would like to draw the attention to a few international agendas that I think are quite interesting and also important to be mindful of in terms of the way the world is moving right now. And then finally, it would be wonderful that we have a small Q&A session, but maybe not just Q&As. I think it would be really cool to hear from your experiences what is going on in Mexico, or also maybe in other countries that you have knowledge on. How do you see that both COVID-19 is impacting the way that we live? And also what can we do about it as academics, but also as active citizens in our country? Great. So Dreamtown. First of all, the name Dreamtown, I think it says it all. We're about cities, we're about towns, and then we're about dreams. And it's the dreams of young people. So everything we do is guided by the dreams of young people. I think that's really the core DNA of what we do. So we are Copenhagen-based NGO, and I think might be able to see outside the windows. We have the street out here. We have a lot of bicycles. I don't know if you've been to Copenhagen, but we love bicycles. I'm sure you do in Mexico too, but here we also have a lot of bicycle lanes, so you don't get hit by cars. And I think that's also, I mean, part of our DNA in Copenhagen and in Scandinavia. We love the cities. So that's also a perspective we think is interesting to bring into international development. How do you actually make cities work, and especially focusing on urban slums? And why are we focusing on urban slums? Well, actually, we know that more than 1 billion people right now, they live in slums or informal settlements. And it's estimated that in 2050, 70% of the world population is expected to live in cities. So this is really interesting. I mean, it's really changing how we're living. If you look at development organizations, NGOs, and you look at where the majority of what they do is taking place, you will find out that most development programs, they focus in the rural areas. It still does. But where we really see the challenges right now is actually in the cities. This is where the inequality is taking place. And maybe that's also maybe an inspiration for you guys when you dive in and do your master's program, is to say, what are the types of conflict that takes place in cities? Because the cities, that's where we live right now. And that's gonna be the arena for where everything is gonna play out in the years to come. So that's Dreamtown. We currently work in Sierra Leone, Uganda, and Zimbabwe. Also starting up a new project in Kenya soon. And then we also work in Denmark. So what do we do? Our core DNA is to have an impact. and that is to strengthen the well-being of young people in cities. So when we've been designing our programs very creatively, I mean, not all the design that we do is boring stuff. I can tell you it's actually pretty cool to work in the NGO sector. Let me just show you my whiteboard. This is my whiteboard. You see, we work a lot of, we like to cut out magazines, be creative. Yeah. So, I mean, developing our program approach, I mean, we talk to a lot of young people, asking them, what are your key priorities? What is the most important for you and your well-being? So, I mean, they talked about three things. One thing is quality public spaces. So, I mean, that can be, as we see in the photo, it can be a youth center, or it could be like a park, or it could be a square. It could be vibrant streets. It could be chill out spots. What we see, especially in urban slums, where there is almost no space, is that public spaces can generate a lot of community life. And it's something that a lot of us take for granted, but it's actually something that most people around the world don't have access to. Also talking to young people about what is important for their well-being, they talk about entrepreneurship, to actually have an income. And that's also what this project I'm going to talk about today is about. So basically entrepreneurship within the informal sector. So what you see here in the photo is a girl from Kampala in Uganda who is into urban agriculture. So she's basically growing her own plants within the slum community where she works. From these plants, she's able to make an income, and she's also able to sell them in the local market. When we started this project, we actually framed it as a public space program. We wanted to make the slums in Uganda more green. But then as the project evolved, I mean, the green stuff coming up was vegetables because people needed something to eat. And we see now that, that this investment in young people's economic opportunities is extremely important. And then the final part that we work on is what we call art activism. And I know that this is also an area where we look a lot towards both South America and Latin America, because I mean, you guys have a lot of cool stuff taking place within this area. But art activism basically means, I mean, how do we create spaces for young people to raise their voice, participate in decision-making processes in creative ways? And what we found is that also in a peace and conflict perspective is that in a lot of the very repressive states that we work, such as Zimbabwe, where it's very challenging to raise your voice, it's very dangerous. If you work through art, it can actually be safe and the government will listen to you. It's not to say that the governments are dumb, but it's to say that they don't understand that art can be activism and art can create change. So these are basically the three program pillars that we're working on, and that young people have told us that these are very important for their well-being and for creating change. Okay, so the COVID-19 challenge in Africa. So we heard a lot about, I mean, COVID-19 around the world, and what people often talk about in case of Africa, at least a year ago, was that when COVID-19 comes to Africa, it's going to be a disaster. The continent is going to be basically swiped out. And why? I mean, we know that in June 2020, we know that 95% of all cases worldwide of COVID-19 were detected in urban areas. And when we look at Africa, 60% of the urban population, they are living in high density informal settlements, also called slums. So people were thinking, what is going to happen when COVID-19 comes to these slum areas? I mean, it's going to spread massively, isn't it? So that's what we were thinking, but it seems not to be the case right now. When we talk to young people, or just the people living in these slum communities or in these different African countries, they say that COVID-19 is actually not the main problem. They haven't experienced that much. What is the real problem is how governments are responding to it. So they say that COVID-19 is really being used as an excuse by government to limit the rights of people and as an excuse to strike down on specific sectors in society. So when when COVID-19 came, we approached a lot of our colleagues working across Sierra Leone, Uganda, and Zimbabwe and said, okay, we need to do emergency programs. What they said was that, no, you don't need to do emergency programs. You need to do peace building programs. You need to do activist programs. You need to do governance programs. This is the real challenge that we are facing right now. So the whole discussion about why COVID-19 is not actually that big of a problem in Africa it's also, I mean, that's a side discussion, and I'm not an epidemiologist, but I have some guess, but we can save that for later. For the time being, the main idea is that for young people in Africa, COVID-19 is a challenge in terms of their civil liberties and their safety and security. This takes me to Zimbabwe. So I don't know if any of you have been to Zimbabwe. It's a beautiful country. The people there are fantastic. It used to be called the breadbasket of Africa, have flourishing fields, but lately it's just been going through a number of different crises. I'm sure a lot of you know about President Robert Mugabe, who was there for some 37 years, I think, who was taken over through a military coup a few years back by the new president called the Crocodile. Or that's not his real name, but he refers to himself as the Crocodile. So you know that when you get a president who calls himself the Crocodile, then you're into trouble, huh? And there are problems in Zimbabwe right now. For once, they are experiencing a humanitarian crisis for several years now. I mean, you have experienced drought, unexpected rains, people are not getting the harvest. This has pushed a lot of people into food poverty, and it's really a big crisis. In addition to that, we can talk about a political crisis. People don't have a voice. People don't have a right to assembly. You have these extraordinary arrests. Yeah, it's definitely not going the right direction in terms of the politics in the country. What is interesting is that under the former president Mugabe, people were very silent. They didn't engage in much resistance. What we start to see now is that more resistance is taking place. Strikes are being organized, protests are being implemented, and we do see resistance. So I think it's also it's a thing of generations. Now we have the young generation coming up, a generation who might not have experienced apartheid, which was there for many years. So, you know, Zimbabwe was under apartheid rule. So when Robert Mugabe saved the country, a lot of people, I think, in a way felt that he was the liberator. But a lot of the young population have grown up and they have only seen this very autocratic government, so they don't have the same kind of respect for the history. So now we do start to see more strikes against this. In addition to this, we also have a cash crisis. This basically means we have inflation and there's just not enough money in the country. And then finally, there's a fuel crisis. So last time I was in Zimbabwe, it took almost, I think it was 4 days to get fuel. So the fuel lines would be like several kilometers long, and people would hire other people to sit in their car and wait until that they could get fuel. So basically, when COVID-19 came to Zimbabwe, we had a country that was plunged into a number of different crises, and we had a country that started to see a lot of political uprising and organizing by different groups in society. So I think my analysis of the situation is that COVID-19 came at a good time, you can say, for the government of Zimbabwe, and it has been used very politically. So as many countries, the government declared a national disaster in March 2020. And this has been followed by extended lockdowns, which we have seen in many countries around the world. I think that what sets these lockdowns aside is probably that they are coming without warnings. They are coming without support schemes for people who might lose their income. And then they are coming at convenient points in time. So I talked to some of my friends from Zimbabwe the other day, and they said, every time we plan a strike, there's suddenly an outbreak of COVID and there's a lockdown. So it's just being used as an instrument all the time to enforce and to keep people down from making their voice heard. And we also see a lot of police brutality against people who are violating this lockdown. And I mean, I'm not sure how the case is in Mexico, but it's very difficult not to violate a lockdown if it comes the day before and you are living in the informal sector. And that's what we're going to be talking about now. Because in Zimbabwe, we have more than 76% who make their living in the informal sector. So in the informal sector, I mean, that's basically outside the formal sector, and it's characterized by people who need to go out every day to make a living, whether it's to go to the markets to sell their produce, or it's to go out and find a day labor job. So basically, when you have a lockdown situation, then people can't make an income. And that income that they make on a daily basis is what they use to pay for their rent, pay for their school fees, pay for their food. So we're seeing a very, very, very challenging situation, basically for 76% of the population in the country. In addition to that, we have also noticed that the government has also closed down markets, and in several cities have also destroyed the markets. So people have asked, what does it help to actually destroy these markets? How does that keep COVID-19 away? The government is saying, well, the market could be the main spot where the virus could spread. However, when you talk to people in Zimbabwe, they say that, and this is, I think it's also very interesting from a conflict perspective, and when we analyze it, where the new forms of resistance come from, they say that they actually come from the informal sector. Some years ago, more people were working in the formal sector. The formal sector was organized by labor unions. Labor unions are known to be the main organizers of strikes and popular resistance. But now there's hardly any people left in the formal sector. I mean, now we see that the people are in the informal sector. So suddenly the informal sector has become the new arena for resistance. And the government knows that. They know that in a way that the people working in the informal sector are the ones that organize these strikes. So they're using COVID-19 as a way to hit down on what the government sees as their main opponents. So yeah, so and I think this is a trend we are going to see not just in Zimbabwe, but in many countries across Africa, that the informal sector is gaining in importance. So now I would like to move to the launch of our completely new project. So the project hadn't started yet. It's starting next month. So maybe I'll give a lecture next year to tell you about how it went. Hopefully it's going to go good. But this project is focused exactly on this challenge about people living in the informal sector are forced to stay at home and they can't make a living, and the government is using different tactics to obstruct their livelihoods. So basically we put ourselves the challenge to say, how can we strengthen the livelihood of young people in urban Zimbabwe, making their living in the informal sector? And on this slide, you can see this is like different, different clip outs from different shops in Harare, which is the capital of Zimbabwe. So when you start a new project, of course, you need to analyze the situation. And I mean, COVID-19 is completely new. So this posed a lot of design challenges for us. So how do we actually put this project together? The first thing we talked about is like, how do we engage people when we can't physically meet due to lockdowns? So in most NGO work, what we do is that we do workshops, we do seminars, we do activities in the markets, activities in the community. Basically, a lot of the activities is about bringing people together. How do we do that now? Well, I think, I mean, what we found out is that we need to do exactly what we do now. We need to find an online approach towards both government advocacy and also livelihood support. Then the second question we asked ourselves, how do we actually reach the most vulnerable groups? And what we quickly found out is that we need to work with the informal sector associations. So these are the new players. These are the guys who are actually there within the market trying to organize people within the informal sector. And this is, of course, a very challenging task because these people are very mobile. A lot of them are young, a lot of them are vulnerable, but you have these very powerful, inspiring organizations who's trying to bring these people together. So we said that these are the guys that we really need to get in contact with. And then the final challenge is that we said, how do we protect people from government retaliation? So, I mean, this is a new project for us. I mean, usually development work is not so dangerous, but suddenly we're not just dealing with development, we are actually dealing with a conflict scenario where a lot of interests are at stake. So talking to a lot of activists, media actors, local partners, they gave us different advice. They talked about force in numbers, online micro activism, and partnership with multiple actors. So basically what they said is that we can't just take a group of young people and push them in front of us. Then it's going to be very easy to say, these guys are the ones who are lighting the torch, and it's going to be easy for the government to strike down. So we need to make a much more radical approach where we spread out the message. So this is why we talk about micro activism. So instead of getting one organization to go out and advocate, then we need thousands of young people to go on Twitter, to go on Facebook, to go on YouTube, to go into the government Facebook pages and make their voice heard. Because when we spread the message out, it's going to be difficult to say, this is the guy who did it. Also, we need to work with a lot of different media actors. So we established partnership with a number of newspapers and radio stations. And again, the key to this approach was to say that we need a lot of them. If we have one paper or one radio station, then we're going to get in trouble. Then they're going to close us down. So that's basically the approach that we're gonna try to pursue, and have these very strong partners to go in between. And I think that also talks a little bit about a classical notion in development where we talk about, are we working for people? Are we working with people? I think in rights-based development, it's always the right thing to say that we're working with people. And in the context of this project, with young people, we're working with young people. In this project, we had to moderate our approach a little bit to say that we're also working for young people. We need some other actors to come in and make their voice heard, and in a way protect the young people so that they are not the frontline activists who are gonna be jailed or beaten. And talking about that, I just want you to show you one guy. This guy, you can see here in the right corner. Can you see him? Yeah, he's called Freddy. So he's one of the guys that we're working with in Zimbabwe. He's part of a very cool local youth organization. So he was coming home from work one day when he met a few military guys. So they basically stopped him, said that there was a lockdown, and then they beat him up. He got really badly injured. After they beat him up, they asked him, so do you have a permit to work and be out? Which he answered, yes, here's my permit. So that's basically what is happening. You go out, you beat up people, and then afterwards you ask. So a lot of violence is taking place. Okay, so the design challenges. So how is this project actually looking like? So this is how our project looks like. So for all of you who's gonna work in development, these are the key terms to know. There's the overall objective. So the overall objective is like, that's our leading star. That's our long-term goal. That's what we are heading towards. So that's the strengthened livelihood of young people in the informal sector. Then when you develop a project, you say, what do you need to do in terms of reaching this overall objective? What are your strategies? And your key strategies is what you call your specific objectives. So we have specific objective 1, or strategy 1 is where we talk about that youth has strengthened their knowledge on COVID-19. So this is also what we found out, is that the war taking place is also a war of information. Probably a lot of you have heard about the term infodemic. And that is basically what is taking place right now. So an infodemic is basically that a lot of information is going out, but nobody really knows what is the correct information. So the government is basically sending out a lot of information. A lot of it is not correct. I mean, almost like Donald Trump or something like that, right? So what we said to ourselves is that we need to be in there, and we need to be able to control the information flow or take an active part in ensuring that correct information comes out about COVID-19, and especially about what is the government doing. And to do that, we are both setting up Wi-Fi hotspots. So in Zimbabwe, a lot of people don't have access to internet. So in order to gain information, you also need to have online access. Then we're working on social media campaigns. We're working on WhatsApp chats and TV shows. So we're working on through a lot of different channels on creating accurate information about what COVID-19 policies and actions are happening right now in the country. And then we have a specific objective 2, which is called that the youth have strengthened their livelihood. So this is where we have gone in and done like market surveys to say, how have COVID-19 impacted the livelihood of young people? And what are the kind of businesses that you can do, for instance, during a lockdown situation? Online trainings in entrepreneurship. We can't bring people together. And then we're going to give out micro grants for youth so that they can actually start a business that's suitable to the context of COVID-19. And then finally, specific objective 3. This is where we talk about youth has strengthened their socio-economic rights. And this is really where we get into the policy aspect. And this is where we actually advocate government to do something better. and to change the policies and laws taking place. And what we're working here is what we call evidence-based advocacy. So basically, what we do is that instead of just saying that you need to change A, B, and C, then it's also to say that we know that this market was burned down or this market was closed. Here are the facts. It makes a stronger case to create change when you can actually document it. This is also where I see a very important role for universities. In a lot of our other projects that we do, we have strong partnership with universities who help us to come in on generating evidence, doing scientific research that we can use for advocacy. We also do monitoring of advocacy asks. So an advocacy ask is, for instance, to say that the government should decongest the markets, or the government shouldn't close down the markets, the government shouldn't beat up young people. Then we monitor this. So we see what is actually happening, when are the violations taking place. And then very importantly, we're gonna actually set up in some safe fora, youth government online dialogues. So to really create that understanding between these people, which is also a very peace-oriented approach towards change. So rather than just yelling at the government, then trying to have them sit down and talk about these issues. So this is basically how our project looks like, and the pilot startup is gonna run for 1 year. Just look at the time. And then finally, the last point, talking about all of this, what relevant international agendas do we see that I think is relevant both for us, coming from a development field, but also for you guys, coming from the academic disciplines, to think about. One of the agendas that a lot of people are talking about right now is the triple nexus. So this is basically the collaboration between actors across the peace, humanitarian, and development sectors. So what we see is that there is an increasing need for these actors to work together. The days are over where it's possible just to do development. Right now, even us as one organization, we can't just do development. We also need to think about humanitarian issues. I mean, people are going to die if they don't get food. But we also need to talk about peace, because you have this whole violent aspect about government policies surrounding the whole thing. So that's also, I think, my key message for you guys is also, like, when you look at this whole course on peace and conflict, is also to say, how can this be linked, for instance, to the humanitarian agenda? How can it be linked to the development agenda? Because I think that the most important thing for actually creating a change is actually to see what are the synergies between these three different areas. So Aarón, I think I was right on time, maybe 2 minutes over. So this is the final slide, and we would like to hear if anybody have some questions, some answers, or maybe some experiences from Mexico. I think it would be really interesting to hear your perspective as young persons. How do you experience the well-being of young people in cities, for once, and potentially also the impact of COVID-19 in your country?
Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you very much for your presentation, Rasmus. Very enlightening and also truly inspiring. Could you please help us stop sharing your screen so that we can have like this mosaic of the attendance? It will be nice, even if you are willing to show your camera. And we open right now the forum for questions and answers, and also comments from the audience. So if you'd like to make any comment, remark, especially those students from the Peace and Conflict Studies in Contemporary Africa and the Middle East, please feel free to do so by raising your hand with the Zoom application, and we can address you. So you can do it verbally. Really? I think they're shy. Please, Jules, go ahead.
Well, I only want to stand out that I could see a similarity with the informal employment because Mexico lives from the informal employment, so there's the same problem.
Mhm.
Just that.
Thank you. Yes, we have Evan and then Anna-Sophie.
Okay, so I just wanted to ask Rasmus if what makes you interested in this kind of project? Like personally, if it's okay to ask, what drives you into doing these projects and being part of it? What took you to start being able to enroll in these things?
Mhm.
What?
That's a very good question. I think when I wrote my master thesis, I went to Sierra Leone, and I ended up living in a slum. I didn't know I was living in a slum. I thought that was just how people were living there. And I went there and I was supposed to write my master thesis. But then I met all these like really cool, inspiring young people working for change. And I forgot all about my master thesis and used all my time there to start establishing this NGO and start brainstorming with these young people and practical ideas and practical solutions towards the challenges that they were facing. So I think what inspires me is for sure working with young people because they have a passion, they have a drive, and they're innovative. And then also, I mean, to work, we are a pretty small NGO. I also work with larger NGOs. The reason why I started Dreamtown was because I thought there was a way to do it less bureaucratic, to work more innovatively, to try out new things, not be too scared to fail, but really listen to the young people. And if they have a cool idea, then I mean, let's try it out. I mean, what's the worst that can happen? So I would encourage all of you to go out somewhere that where you're outside of your comfort zone, and put your theory to practice.
Thank you, and I second that as well. So we have Anna-Sophie and then Andrea, please.
I just wanted to say that I thought that it had another relation between what you said and Mexico in the topic of police violence, because even in Jalisco we had one case of very, like, it was all over the news, and also in the part that they are not letting us out, and I related that to the feminist movement in Mexico and how they locked us down after this started in Mexico in March. So I don't know, I think you have a very good point by saying that COVID was a way that governments can suppress us.
Mm-hmm. So what are the young people? Are the young people doing anything about it? I mean, you talked about a feminist movement. So what is happening in Mexico right now?
Well, in March, after the 8th of March, we had in Jalisco one of the biggest marches on number of people, and so did Mexico, and it was a really like strong topic that we were speaking here in Mexico, and there were like a lot of tendederos, a lot of protests in schools about sexual harassment and violations and all of these topics. And after the 8th of March, when all of the month we were going to speak about that and we were going to do something about it, the quarantine started here in Jalisco and in all over Mexico. So I think that's like...
Okay.
if any one of you also has some information regarding the organization, especially within the feminist movement, please feel free to share your thoughts with us. And also, I had a very cool presentation in another one of my courses this Tuesday, talking about that. So if any of you are present, please feel free to comment. And now it's time for Andrea, please.
Thank you. Well, I do have like a very small organization, a youth organization where I live. It's not a urban one, it's more a rural one. And well, from listening this, it's very inspiring. And I understand that the strategy was to build a net of multiple actors. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about the role of the young people in building the net of these different actors involved in the microactivism.
Mm-hmm. So the role of them. So a lot of the organizations that we work with are youth-led organizations, and what we see in Zimbabwe is that that the art sector has a lot of very vibrant youth organizations. So you both have like hip hop collectives and graphic designer collectives, and you have like dance groups, and you have also like these community media channels. So you have this like super creative, energetic vibe. And I think what is so interesting, and it's very different from Denmark, where I work, is that when you have organizations like that in Denmark, they do it for profit. When you have organizations in Zimbabwe like that, they do it for change. So they are really good at creating networks amongst themselves, and also to bring in less or more marginalized young people from the local communities. So I think, I mean, yeah, the art sector is for sure our focus when we talk about youth mobilization in Zimbabwe, in a place like that, because we also know we can do that fairly safe. When we talk about the more political issues, that's where we talk about the big non-formal labor associations who have maybe like between 70,000 members to 1 million members, who are very large and can take the more hard struggles head on.
Thank you. Also, just before giving the word to Dayanara, I want to share with you that I was really impressed, because I didn't like take into consideration the role like social media could play, and also the new direction like peace and conflict activism, and also peace and conflict work itself could be performed by, I mean, virtually. We are very used to like direct contact with people, and this is a very, very cool approach, very adaptive to the current situation. Also, the methodology on development studies and development projects gives a lot of inspiration for us also to lead our projects as well. Yeah. Thank you. Dayanara, please go ahead.
Yes, I just wanted to ask, considering like the current situation and the pandemic, if you already have like plan in the future, some how are you gonna keep working in Africa if there's currently like this lockdown? Like, do you already have plans for the future, or you're just like waiting to see what happens?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. We're gonna keep working there, for sure, and that's also why we have some very strong partners there who can run the projects when we're not able to travel there. But I think so. We haven't been there for the last year, but I think from not next month, but then the month after, we're gonna start traveling there again. It went from being a how do you call it, like a legal issue of traveling there not being possible, towards a moral issue. So we were a little bit afraid that if we traveled there, we could bring COVID-19 into the slum communities, which would be a very big responsibility to take on us. But now I think we know so much about the virus, and also seen how much is spread in Africa, that we believe that we can protect ourselves. So we're gonna be traveling there from November, December, and then we're going to be back in there. And for sure, I mean, and not just for us, it's also, I mean, at least also when you look at Europe, like the government of Denmark and many other governments, I mean, the focus on Africa is only increasing. It's gaining in popularity on a lot of different levels, both in terms of development, but also in terms of the peace issues, and then of course also in terms of migration. So, yeah.
It is interesting that you bring that up, because that's not only a moral call that is made by only development organizations. And it's interesting because probably you remember in the field that there are like many humanitarian NGOs that also face the dilemma of either complying with the quota made by some authoritarian governments so that they can perform their humanitarian activities. And now we have a different type of moral dilemma, which is, well, obviously up to each organization. And in this case, I'm pretty sure you have your all the requirements and all the measures to avoid the spreading of the disease, but also the development and peace building action is even bigger. I have here in the chat, Maribel. She wants to take part in the discussion. So please, Maribel.
Hi, I wanted to ask how hard it is with this new online modality that you get to reach or get in contact with vulnerable population, because I have this feeling that most of the people that get in contact with you or your organization has like this small privilege or having internet access and that. So how hard it is to get to the most vulnerable population?
And that's a really good question, and also a question that we were battling with until we did like a small pilot project on running these social media campaigns. And what we found out is that it works fantastically. So I think in Zimbabwe, the first $100 you make, you're gonna use it on a smartphone. So every young person, I mean, I know from a slum community across Africa, they have a smartphone. And I think maybe that's also an urban issue that we work in cities, but they are so connected. So sometimes they do have problem accessing Wi-Fi, but as soon as we put up that infrastructure that they can connect their phones, I mean, amazing things just happens. So I mean, with the campaign that we tried out, we basically said every day we asked the new person to post a COVID-19 awareness message on social media and pass it on, and it just spread across the country. A lot of people took part in it, especially from urban slum communities. And the irony of this campaign is that the government of Zimbabwe saw it and they said, "Oh, this is fantastic. Can you help us develop our campaign?" So they couldn't really see that we were actually like doing quite a lot of resistance and opposition towards them. And they were just like, "Wow, this is so cool. Help us being young and reach the young people out there." So I think there's something about, especially in Africa, about technological progress. I think in Denmark, it's like the progress go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. In Africa, they jump from 1 to 10. So it goes extremely fast, and a lot of innovation is coming out from places like Kenya and also Mozambique, Nigeria. I mean, mobile money came to Africa 15 years ago. I mean, it's really interesting, and yeah, and you can be sure that you get the news from them first.
Thank you. And also, before going with Lucy, on that point, I just remember, probably it's my gap. Last time I was in Africa, it took ages for connecting the internet. They did have only like those telephone modems, and it was like I spent probably 2 hours on a cyber cafe, on an internet cafe, and just to send an email. It was very frustrating in the beginning. But so the infrastructure right now is enabling these sort of projects to be operational when it comes to connectivity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they are, but I mean, but governments are also trying. I mean, are also trying to shut it down, as we've seen in Uganda. So there's an election up in Uganda soon. So the first thing the government said was that, okay, due to COVID-19, the election is going to be online. So already making it difficult for people to vote. Then the next thing they said is that, okay, we're going to shut down the internet. So, I mean, they haven't shut it down permanently, but from time to time, they do shut it down. So, I mean, they know that the internet is a powerful force. I think which we could also see with Obama's campaign, right? In the States, when he won the presidency, there was a social media campaign that just went viral. I mean, also with Donald Trump, who's just, who can say whatever he wants on Twitter and still get supporters.
That's for sure. Thanks. And Lucy, please.
I just have a really short comment. When we were talking about how is youth feeling here in Mexico, or how police brutality is happening, it reminds me of protests. There were protests because a man was killed in a small city in Jalisco, which is called Ixtlahuacán de los Membrillos, because he was not wearing a mask, and his body was found dead, and he was killed by the cops. And the young people, a lot of young people, went to protest in the capital of Jalisco, which is Guadalajara. And it also let us see a really big problem here in Mexico, which is the enforced disappearances, because many of the people who went to the protests were there were a lot of arbitrary detentions, and there were a lot of missing people for hours, and it's also a really big problem here in Mexico, the enforced disappearances. Many of our friends from college attended the protests, and we were checking them through WhatsApp to see if they were okay. And yeah, I think it not only lets us see a problem, which is police brutality, but also the enforced disappearances. And a lot of young people are taking into consideration what's happening and speaking up. And yes, I think that's a really good thing, because many people are not staying silent. And yeah, that's it.
Thank you. So, I just have a brief comment here on the chat. So the question is, there's someone saying having problems with the microphone. I understand that in our activism, we tend to think about actions to help based on our knowledge of an issue. What changed in the project agenda after listening to these young people? What was on their agenda? How did the guide to the project to enlighten how these issues have to be addressed?
Very good question. I think the whole approach for taking the project online was the idea of the young people. The whole approach of using art as activism was from the young people. Our approach towards working on public spaces is from the young people. Also, I mean, our whole approach for working with young people, I mean, in a very informal way, is also informed by them. And I think that's also something to really, I mean, an important lesson learned is that if you want to work with young people, you need to understand how young people are. So you don't need to use, and now we're into the engine of an NGO, so you don't need to use long reporting formats, complex financial reports, high demands on their registrations as organizations. You need to keep it informal, and you need to keep it flexible, and then you need to trust people instead of holding them to account on every single penny.
Thank you. And
I think one more point, and then forgive them when they do whatever they want. So basically, I mean, the idea with the online campaign, they actually just did it, and then afterwards they're like, "Look what we did." I was like, "Well, the money wasn't supposed to be used for that, but this is so cool. So let's do more of that."
Sure, and also it's very cool that the approach went bottom up instead of like being a top-down solution, which is very, very interesting how the local communities provided the solutions to their own context and situation, and probably a lesson for us to provide some solutions to our own context as well from these experiences. Unfortunately, do you want to say anything else, Rasmus? Any final comment or?
Yeah, only that it's really wonderful to meet all of you, and I actually enjoyed this last session most when we had the chance to talk. I'm usually not that big a fan of just giving lectures. It's much better just to have a dialogue about what is going on. And I think it's really interesting. I mean, I think we have a lot to learn also from Mexico. And I think I shared Aarón can also share his my email. If you have other ideas or inspiration for how we could work better with young people, I mean, feel free to share them. Or if you have an idea for a cool project in Mexico, we would love to hear about it.
Certainly.
So, yeah, thank you so much.
No, thank you. And also, unfortunately, this is all you have time for today. And once again, I want to thank you, Rasmus, for accepting this invitation. I look very much forward to exploring more joint ventures in the future. The link for the recording of this session is going to be available in a couple of hours. It's going to be posted at the Department of International Relations website, but also I'm going to share it by email if you want to. So that's all for today. Thank you all for attending this seminar, and goodbye. Thank you. Also, one more thing in the end. Will you be joining a group selfie so that we can have a good memory of this moment? Turning on your camera, probably those of you who are present. We have like 3 screens on here. So
how do we do that? I haven't done an online, so learning new things.
It's like a screenshot with the attendance, and you have this mosaic view of all the cameras. So I also ask my students every class to do that, to like check the attendance, and they like comb their hair and put their biggest smile. So they're going to do so in this moment. So it's going 1, 2, 3. Now second screen. 1, 2, 3. Oh, they're all smiling. Beautiful. And finally, third screen. Great. 1, 2, 3. Thank you. Thank you very much for your attendance. See you soon. Rasmus, once again. Tusind tak.
Thank you so much. Tusind tak, Aarón. Det var en fornøjelse.
Tak for det. For the students of the Peace and Conflict Studies in Contemporary Africa and the Middle East, you know we have a 10 minutes recess and we come back to resume our session. So thanks for this experiment. I think it went well. I'm going to start recording.